Chairman, one of the things I just wanted to ask right out of the gate is, the ability to have a conversation with someone in your position is frankly a little unique. Is this a sign of the PUC trying to do more public outreach and just be more transparent and explanatory with people of Texas, the people of Texas?
Absolutely. We're taking a much more open and stakeholder-driven approach to both our normal matters of business, but also our market redesign effort that we've undertaken after February's storm and at the direction of the legislature from the most recent legislative session. So we're making sure that we are transparent about the actions we're taking, the analysis we're undertaking to reach those decisions. We're being very open in terms of the market redesign with our public work sessions. I hope you've had a chance to see some of those. So not only are we driving towards transparency, but we're also trying to make sure that we, as a commission, have an entire range of stakeholders participating in our market redesign process.
I know that a lot of the work you all are doing now is certainly forward-looking, but I do want to go back in time, if you'll indulge me just for a minute here. So can you just share your own personal experience during Winter Storm Uri and whether or not you lost power and how that was for you as a citizen of Texas?
Sure. I lost power and water at various stages, and that largely looked like curling up with a dog in comforters until I realized that needed to find a friend to stay with. So fortunately, I was able to stay with a friend down the road, and luckily my power came back on a few days later, right before his power went out. So he and his girlfriend were able to come stay warm in my house immediately after I'd been able to take advantage of staying with them, and then unfortunately the pipes burst, so I've still got a hole in my wall from the water damage.
There was widespread anger and really outrage. I mean, did you feel that yourself?
I certainly was not a happy customer. Of course, at the time I was at the Water Development Board, so I didn't have the focus on the issues that I do now. And so, yeah, certainly a very frustrated customer of the Texas power market, and certainly was clear to me that change was needed and would be imminent.
So let me ask you this, then a couple of months passed and the governor's office, I suppose, called you and offered you the job as the PUC chairman. Why was that something you wanted or were interested in taking on?
Well, initially I was very hesitant to consider the job and express my concern to the governor's office, knowing what an incredible challenge the PUC has in front of it. I was very happy with the Water Development Board, but thankfully the governor and his team were persistent in the notion that this is very much an ERCOT market design challenge, and so they wanted someone with a market background to bring that perspective. They wanted an outsider who hadn't been involved in the industry. And they wanted somebody who had a demonstrated history of working with the legislature in a constructive manner, because at that moment in time we had only a few months left in the legislative session to work through those challenges.
You said that you knew at the time that the commission had its work ahead of them. What did you see as that work then, and what do you see it as now?
Then it was very clear to me that our power grid was not physically or operationally able to handle a weather event like that storm in February. That was apparent to everyone in dramatic scope. Since then, I've learned that once we got under the hood of our ERCOT power market, that we've got even more challenges that extend beyond just extreme weather events to even ensuring reliability on normal days, as you saw in April and June, when we had to issue those conservation notices in the absence of any extreme weather. It's just a normal day.
So what you just said, though, kind of does not necessarily inspire confidence given where we are right now. I mean, can you just elaborate on that?
Thankfully, we've been able to make some pretty dramatic operational changes to buttress the reliability of ERCOT while we undertake this market redesign. First and foremost, we've established a margin of safety. Almost immediately after taking the job, I worked with the ERCOT team to ensure that they were essentially buying more power reserves to have in backup. And also, importantly, changing the way they operate the grid. We've historically worked under a crisis-based business model that had very, very low prices, but then only at the precipice, the ERCOT market would reward generators with high prices. But you had to get right to the brink before those folks were generating power in a reliable way. And so we've stepped back from that and taken a much more cautious approach. Instead of driving towards that scarcity, we've been turning on, even using force of law to turn on generators sooner rather than later. We're not taking chances. We're not hoping that it works out, and we're hoping that the grid gets to the brink but doesn't go over. We're turning on generators sooner rather than later.
And that's all kind of separate from your market redesign, though, right?
Correct.
Those are just kind of stopgap reforms that you're doing right now.
Correct. Those are operational changes in how ERCOT manages the grid day to day. And we've seen, fortunately, that we've seen that those are needed, and they've helped stabilize the grid tremendously this summer.
Are there other examples of things like that y'all have done from a regulatory standpoint?
So those are the two big operational approaches we've taken. From a regulatory standpoint, we're in the process of implementing our weatherization requirements, meaning that we'll have a more resilient grid going into this winter than we had last winter. We're doing that in two phases, but the first phase is getting up to the national NERC standards. First and foremost, let's get our power generators up to that national standards. And on top of that, by December 1st, the power generators in Texas need to show us that they've fixed anything that went wrong last winter. And of course, if they can't do that, can't meet those standards, there's enforcement and penalties behind that. So as we go into the next winter, we'll have both a physically more enhanced grid than we had last winter, and in addition to that, we'll have the backstop of our margin of safety and the fact that we're now operating the grid in a much more cautious and conservative approach.
Can you, in the most layman terms possible, talk about your market redesign efforts in the months to come?
Sure. At the core of it is making sure that we drive revenues to reliable generators. And the commission has taken a very deliberate position that we don't want to pick and choose winners and losers going in the front end. We want to reward the outcome we want, reliability. And we don't particularly care where that generator comes from, if it's wind, gas, solar, hydro, but it's got to be reliable power. When Texans turn on the lights to power their homes and power their businesses, when they ask for that power, the power needs to be there. So full stop. We've got to deliver reliability.
And so that obviously is not only a mandate from the governor's office, but some of what you're doing was made possible by the legislative action this past session, correct?
Correct. We've had an incredible effort from the Texas legislature in delivering once-in-a-generation reform to the Texas power grid, and in an incredibly short amount of time. It's a remarkable accomplishment to be able to address all of those issues, get that legislation through the House and the Senate and to the governor's desk within a matter of months. And that has enabled us at the commission to have the direction we need and the authority we need to go through this market redesign to quickly and decisively change all the different pieces pull the levers we need to redesign this ERCOT market so it provides more reliable power in the most affordable way possible for Texans.
And it's more flexibility and latitude than you all have had in the past.
Correct. And our job is to make sure we take full advantage of that and we utilize all of the tools we've been given. And importantly, there's also new governance at ERCOT, which is another incredibly important change the legislature made. But we're working closely with that organization and its leadership and utilizing the full measure of the tools we've got at our disposal.
With regard to your market redesign, how do renewables play a role in that?
Well, just like anything, renewable generators have pros and cons, just like any other type of generator. And we've got the same challenge that almost every country in the world has of reconciling renewable with reliable. We love the low cost of renewables. We love the low carbon output. We love the fact that they've got an isolated supply chain. They're not relying on long supply chains. But we also can't let Texas be vulnerable to losing power if the wind stops blowing or the cloud covers a solar panel. Thankfully, there's a range of tools that can be used to enhance the reliability of renewable generators. And we're, of course, looking at all of that. And our job is to make sure at the end of the day, our market rewards folks who bring a reliable generator to our grid. That could be windmills with batteries, solar panels with batteries. It can be natural gas. It could be a range. We don't want to be picking and choosing those winners, but we want to make sure to incentivize reliability.
So we've talked about sort of the operational adjustments that have been made and the accountability changes, and then of course the market redesign going forward, which seems like it's going to have a really monumental effect on the business end of all of this as well. Let me ask you this, and it's kind of going back to the first question I asked you. When people hear the three letters PUC or the acronym ERCOT, many Texans do not have, warm feelings or kind feelings toward those two agencies. I just want to talk to you from sort of the public relations standpoint. How again you convince the public that you're making the necessary changes to keep the lights on when it's either really hot or really, really cold?
Sure. I mean, conversations like this are a big change in the way the PUC has traditionally done business. And we're going to continue doing public outreach like we are now. All of our meetings at the PUC are live cast. You can get them streaming online. And most importantly, as we go through this monumental market redesign, that, like you said, will have a tremendous impact on, if we do our jobs right, it better have a tremendous impact on the way power is generated in the state of Texas. We're doing that in a public forum with these public work sessions where we bring in experts and stakeholders from around the state to share best practices, what works, what doesn't work. And so we're making an unprecedented effort to engage with the public, share very directly and clearly what's happening at the commission, how we're approaching this market redesign. So at the end of the day, the general public in Texas knows what we're doing to deliver them more reliable power.
How long do you think this will all take?
Our goal is to have the blueprint for the market redesign completed by the end of the year. And that is an extraordinarily aggressive redesign of the power grid for the 9th largest economy in the planet. It's incredibly aggressive, but we've got a lot of good work to build on, and that we can lean on from previous efforts. And depending on what the blueprint is, the timing on implementing that is somewhat dependent. We know we want to have the blueprint by the end of the year, depending on how big the house is, if you will. I don't know how long it'll take to actually build what's in the blueprint. It could be a month or 3 months, 6 months, potentially longer, but we'll certainly start implementing everything we can as soon as we can.
But if we had the same event, the same weather event happen this winter, are you comfortable that what you have done in the meantime would prevent a catastrophe like that from happening again?
It's hard to prognosticate
Sure.
or play Monday morning quarterback, but I am absolutely confident that the way we've changed operating the grid, a margin of safety, and approaching it with an abundance of caution provides much more reliability and resilience in an extreme weather event in the summer or winter. And we know that we are going to have new weatherization regulations in effect so that by December 1st this year, before we get into the meat of the winter, generators in Texas will be more resilient in the face of a cold weather event than they were last year. And we're going to continue, and we're not going to stop there. We're going to continue to figure out ways to enhance the physical infrastructure and to ensure more reliable operations in the ERCOT control room.